Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and I'm delighted today to be joined by JP Mason and Colin Watt, who's standing in for Declan, who has tested positive for COVID. So all our thoughts and best wishes are with wee Dec. Welcome back to the show, gentlemen. How are you?
Good, Paul. Thanks for having us.
Doing well.
Always welcome. JP, that number over your shoulder, not too long ago, it seems, was over 100 days till Celtic's next fixture. It's now sitting at 33. Do you get the sense, I mean, this is where the headline is going. Do you get the sense that time is running out?
I do, yeah. I mean, I was reading some stuff yesterday just saying how woefully unprepared we're going to be going into games of such magnitude against a team that, you know, by all accounts and what I've read and what the guys were saying yesterday, Midtjylland are no walkovers. Do you know what I mean? It's this is you know, the worst prepared we've ever been for Champions League qualifiers. I know we've been badly prepared in the past, but we've never had the manager come in so late. We've never had the unrest in the camp in terms of players that went away, and you know, just general a general kind of trepidation over everything of the whole club. So it's not good timing, and we knew it was going to happen. That's why that's why Tony said about having the number up there, because we knew even back at 102 days or whatever it was, we knew that time was running out. Well, time is definitely running out now, because that's 33. That's wild.
It is. And you know, some of the points that JP just made there in his introduction, Colin, I think that, yeah, we've seen it coming, but a massive part of this, it must be remembered, is that we went so far down the line with somebody else, and that's why it's sitting at 33 days and we've just got a new manager. But, you know, it looks as though, and we'll talk through this, because we were in the press conference yesterday with Stephen Welsh. He's good, but he's a man of few words, and he'll answer only what he wants to answer. But we did manage to get enough of a sense that there is a real upheaval at the moment. You imagine being Stephen Welsh and some of the others who are going back for pre-season training when, you know, half your first team are on Euro duty with Scotland. Some others are out of contract and, you know, they're not at the club at the moment. Some others have returned from their loans. I mean, it must be a very difficult workplace to go back to, Colin Watt. And I think that this is the biggest concern, that, you know, it's almost as if going back to that process of being prepared for that first Champions League game in the qualifier and making the remark that Nir Biton's going to be playing centre half, and it actually coming to fruition. Now, Colin, this isn't being disrespectful to Nir Biton, but what I'm trying to illustrate here is that, you know, we're in the same boat again, and as JP says, probably in a worse position than we've been in the last decade preparing for our Champions League qualifier.
Yeah, I mean, I think what JP's sort of referring to is some of the games that we used to go into with Nir Biton and Owen O'Connell sitting at centre half, and we thought those were bad days, but now you're kind of looking at it and you're going, who are we actually going to be playing at centre half? Biton, from what I'm aware, might not even be in the country. He's still in Israel. So we don't even know if he'll be back for these qualifiers. I think he's actually looking to leave the club. So who does that actually leave you with? Does that mean that you go into the qualifiers with Welsh and Held at centre-half? Is that
surely
the kind
not
of options that you're left
surely
with?
Not.
You'd love to think not, but I mean, 33 days, you've got, yeah. I think it's just over a week until the deadline is that you have to register your first squad. And then after that, you've got I think you can add 2 players to it.
Well, no, it's not, and we will look at all the different permutations and rumours and possible incomings, etc., all around that, Colin. But that's where we are. You know, there are certain areas of that squad that is wafer thin, and one of them is the centre half position. As I said, we yesterday got an opportunity to catch up with Stephen Welsh. He's a player that I have been very impressed with over the last year, Colin, and I think that when he's come in to the squad, he's come in at the worst possible time, hasn't he? you know, when confidence was low, when there's a backlash against the situation with the manager, where he's throwing players under a bus, in comes Welsh. It should be a glorious introduction to the Celtic team. And I think he done particularly well, and we will be speaking about Welsh. 21 appearances, Colin, the same in actual fact as Nir Bitton last season. So he was asked all around whether or not he sees himself as a first team pick next season and everything else. So we'll go through each of the points individually, and we'll also have a wee chat about what your thoughts are and what some of the kind of insights give us when we're looking at Stephen Welsh. Here he is yesterday at the press conference.
Well, I think it's going to be a tough game anyway, because we know Midtjylland are a quality team. I think any team that is competing in the Champions League qualifiers is going to be a good team. So to have it two legs, especially try to get fans here at Celtic Park, that would be a good advantage for us to get people, even how few it will be, to get anyone back into the stadium would be excellent for us.
I think a big part of tuning into the Euros has been the fact that, you know, the fans are back in some big numbers at some of the games. Colin, obviously when you're drawn against a team like Midtjylland, the quality of that side compared to, because of the stage that we're going into the competition at, the quality of that side is much stronger than some of the first European games we've had recently, isn't it?
Yeah, it's all to do with the path that we're taking. So we're taking the league path this year, and you're coming up against teams like Midtjylland, who finished second in the Danish league. You could have also played, I think it was Galatasaray and Austria Vienna. Some very, very strong, well-experienced sides. Now, that's not to say that the teams that we've faced in recent years haven't been that good, but they haven't been to the standard of the teams that we're playing in the earlier rounds now. And that all comes down to the fact that you're playing teams from the sort of nations round about Scotland's level, as opposed to maybe playing one of the lower leagues where Scotland have previously been seeded. So it is going to be a very difficult path for Celtic if they want to even try and get anywhere near the group stage this year. And we are probably very underprepared for this. And it is quite worrying. If you were playing someone, and no disrespect to them, but like a KR Reykjavik or a Noma Kalju, then going into that with a centre-half pairing of maybe Helge and Welsh, you're going, we might just be able to get through this. But the standard that you're playing now, it's just not going to cut it.
Now, I noticed there a lovely bit of product placement, JP, when Stephen Welsh came into the press conference wearing the new jersey. And it looks really good. But I also noticed there's a bit of product placement on your famous coat hanger over your shoulders. Talk to us about that. That looks to me like it's an original, because it's a kid's size, is it not?
It is a kid's size, yeah. That's my... I bought... Well, I didn't buy. My parents got me the home version of that strip and the away version 1990, I guess it would have been, or maybe 91. And I love it. I really wish... I was in a vintage shop down, do you know, across from the St Enoch Centre where Mono is, Monorail Cafe, and there's a vintage shop there, and they had a rack in it of football tops, and they had that top in a large, and it was 75 quid, but it had a nick on the shoulder, quite a substantial nick, and I was like, 75 quid for a football top with a hole in it? It's a bit much. I tried it on. I was with Brendan, our mutual friend Brendan, and I tried it on, and I didn't get it, and I really regret not getting it. And the woman that runs the shop, Celtic fan, and she said what she did for her sons, or two sons, growing up through the 80s, she would buy the adult top and the child's top. So she would buy the top that they could wear as a kid, and she'd buy the adult version. So they have minted replica kits from like their youth to wear as an adult. That's brilliant, eh? So she's got all those amazing tops from the 80s through the 90s, and they've got them all as an adult Celtic fan. So probably the same age as us, you know.
It's turned into a proper industry, isn't it? The retro and the remakes. You see all the companies doing the remakes, and the Schneiders that are coming in from who knows where, but they're pretty good remakes. Colin, sorry I butted in there.
I was going to say, can you imagine how much that would cost nowadays to do that?
I know.
I mean, I looked at the Scotland top in GD Sports, and I think it's sitting, because they've now only put the ones out with the UEFA and the Respect logos on the arms, it's sitting at about £70 odd. and a kids one's about 50, 60. So to buy, even for 2 kids, an adult and a juniors, you're talking best part of £300. It's scary, the prices.
I got that.
It's been up to now.
I got that in Sportique in Bathgate, which was the sports shop on the high street in Bathgate, and I got it, and it was in a replicate box. So it was like the box had the top, the shorts, and the socks. So, but all you saw in the front cover of the box was the middle bit of the top, and then behind it was the shorts, and behind it was the socks. And I'm pretty sure it was about 25 quid for the full thing. 25
I remember that replicate box you're talking about, JP. I had the home one. The home one had a great shading SFA. That obviously back then you wore with pride. Colin's laughing. Colin's laughing because times have changed. People will tell me they were the same back then, but I was just a bairn and I didn't know any better.
It's got SFA on the collar there and on the shoulder as well.
Yeah,
I think SFA has a different meaning nowadays.
It does. Before we move on, first player that comes to your mind, JP, when you look at that jersey?
Probably McStay.
Paul McStay.
Aye, McStay, I'd say, yeah. Just because I was obsessed with him when I was a wee guy.
I think I have an idea of where you're going to go with this, so I'll leave it, but I'm going to go with Brian McClare.
Chalky, yes. I wasn't going to go down that because I'm going to be totally brutally honest. I remember Gough, because remember we played that game, it was against Cyprus away, and they played about 9 minutes of injury time, and Gough scored 2 goals in the injury time. You remember that?
I do remember it, yeah.
And we were wearing that kit. So sorry to mention Richard Gough on a Celtic state of mind, but there we are. Stephen Welsh there was talking about the 2-legged affair. Obviously we didn't have that luxury last season and we bounced out the competition at an early stage. I was thinking about that because in Denmark, of course, there's going to be a healthy enough crowd in the away leg. And again, ask yourself the question, does that benefit the away team because it's all going to be home fans, of course, or does that energy benefit the home team? I think they would just prefer JP to play in front of a crowd of some description after a year of playing to empty stadiums.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's been grim watching it as a fan at home, and I'm sure it's been grim for the players as well because they just don't have that energy, that kind of. It's something to feed off. It's like imagine a band playing. It's like a band playing to an empty room, or 10 people or 20 people. You're not going to get the same enjoyment. You're not going to get the same buzz, energy, for that gig as if it was a full house, which is precisely why you sell capacity gigs out. So I think regardless of the fact that it'll be home fans, I saw John Paul Taylor's tweet saying that due to the UEFA ruling, no fans will be allowed to travel. So we couldn't go there and they can't come here, and that'll be the case, I think, all the way through the qualifying stages, which I did kind of expect. I mean, there's no way that was going to be opened up. But yeah, I think God just let us back into the grounds, man. It's been brutal. It's been brutal.
It has been, and I think that when you're looking at the last season, Colin, there is obviously light at the end of the tunnel when you're watching the Euros and you're seeing fans getting back in. I'm going to ask you, I'm going to get this question out the road because it's Scotland jersey that's over JP's shoulder. What's your thoughts on Friday? I mean, are you a big international football fan yourself, Colin? What?
I mean, I think everyone's been captured by this international bug that's been going round in the last sort of year or two, especially since Scotland qualified. And there's a bug. There's something going around. One of the ones. When I was a lot younger, I used to follow Scotland all the time. Got to Hampden a couple of times as well. And then I think that the problem with the national team was when you looked at the performances under the likes of Craig Burley, for example, not Craig Burley. You know what I mean?
His uncle. His uncle George.
George Burley. That was it. Things like that, and playing no striker up front. That's enough to own anyone.
Ferencvaros comes to mind.
The 4-6-0 away to the Czech Republic, ironically. But things like that, it's enough to kind of bore you off football. Over the last sort of 4 or 5 years, I think everyone's started to take a lot more pride in the Scottish national team. And I was as disappointed as anybody else with that performance on Monday. I don't know what David Marshall's doing nearly at the halfway line, but it just was... I discovered now why everyone says Scotland are glorious at failure. I'd never experienced it in my lifetime, but now I got to see it. And I mean, things like the own goal that nearly happened, some of the sitters, and then that disastrous goal, which will probably go on and win goal of the tournament. Schick will probably get the goal of the tournament.
It was a remarkable finish. It was a remarkable finish. The thing is, Colin, it's interesting to hear you say that about the glorious failure. Like JP, this isn't the first time I've experienced it, and there was a resignation on Monday. It wasn't, you're disappointed, but it wasn't this gutting disappointment. It was almost expected, to be honest with you, JP. I don't know, did you get the same vibe yourself?
Yeah, I watched it. I watched it on my phone in the car on the way back down from Aberdeen with my uncle. My uncle doesn't care for football at all, really. So I watched it on my phone, which is a bit of a surreal experience, watching a huge game of that magnitude. First game back in a tournament, and I'm watching it on my phone in the car. But I didn't have any wild hopes. There was a lot of things like on Twitter, people saying pre-match picture of Braveheart and post-match renting and that, and train spotting standing at the side of the train track saying it's not very good being Scottish. I don't quite buy into that, because I certainly wasn't getting all gung-ho and Braveheart thinking, oh, we're going to do them and all that. I mean, the Czech Republic are a good side. We weren't playing minnows there. You know, I know they're maybe not littered with household names, but that boy that scored the 2 goals, did he not go for a huge transfer fee to Sampdoria, and then he's at Leverkusen now?
And believe it or not, JP, Celtic were actually linked with him years ago under Ronnie Dyler.
He was probably available for $500,000 and he came to Lennox Town. You're going to tell us that as well, Colin, just to brighten up our morning.
No, Ronnie Dyler was interested in bringing him in one of the January transfer windows, and we didn't get him.
Menno.
Was that the same one that we brought in Guidetti and Skipovic instead?
God,
probably.
That'd have been one of the summer windows. I think this was a January transfer, but it's out there. If you go and look it up, he was certainly linked with a move to Celtic.
Fantastic.
It certainly did the damage, but Scotland, I mean, who knows what will happen tomorrow? It could go either way. We could have the game of our lives, you know, in front of fans at Wembley, you know, or I would hate to think the reverse of that, because I mean, England are a good side. I know they only scraped a win against Croatia, but they're a good side when they want to be, and they're littered with, you know, match winners. So.
You're right. Now, to keep it Celtic related, Colin already mentioned David Marshall. I'm going to throw Jack Hendry into that mixing pot as well. Does that finally put to bed the Marshall and the Hendry, and we should have brought them back and we should have signed them and all this kind of thing, do you think, JP, when you actually see in the cold light today that comedy of errors? Because that's what it was.
It was. I don't know. I don't know if Jack. I mean, by the same token, Jack Hendry hits the crossbar with a shot, you know, and another day that goes in and he's a hero. So him having a shot from distance like that was a bit mental, but he's not going to be the first centre half to hit a shot from whatever it was, 35, 40 yards. And by the same token, Marshall being so far up the park, I've read a few people saying, well, that's what keepers do nowadays. And it's like, well, did they go that far up? I don't think they go that far up. Yeah, maybe they don't stand on their line, but they don't go right up to the halfway line, almost at the halfway line of the opposition. I mean, if Marshall's even 6 yards further back, he probably gets that, you know, because that's why he's forced into doing the kind of the meme leap that's become a meme, you know, like where he like throws himself into the net. But 6 yards back, he probably arguably gets to that. So I don't know if that makes Marshall suddenly a bad keeper and Hendry a bad defender. I personally would still. I don't think signing Marshall certainly now would be an idea. Maybe for last season, perhaps you could argue that would have been an idea. I would still like to see Jack Hendry back at Celtic. I know that might not serve well amongst people watching. They might think I'm a clown, but I would rather see him back. If he wants to come back and he wants to prove himself at Celtic, then I would say he deserves an opportunity. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But yeah.
What I seen, JP, after the game was a lot of people saying that this should stop the chat on ACSOM about Jack Hendry, because I've said it quite a bit over the last few weeks that we're in a situation where we really need to assess everybody at our disposal now, and I include players in there that I don't necessarily rate, because I'm not a big fan of Bayo. I don't think he's ever going to be a Celtic player. But I think there needs to be a period of bringing players like that back in. Sved would be another one. Luke O'Connell, that's for you, Colin. Bring them in and assess them and let the new manager assess. Surely the new manager has to have a part to play. And if there is a player and there is an opportunity, and we think with Jack Hendry, the situation may well now be out of our hands, even though we had Scott on from the Belgian podcast saying that the deadline was the 31st of May in relation to Sten's option to buy. It was the 31st of May, and if it hadn't been done by then, the ball's back in Celtic's court. Nothing has been mentioned on an official basis, Colin. Do you think it's, like JP says, it would be remiss of Celtic to allow players like Hendry to go out to Belgium, or even Sved to go back out to Mechelen, which has been also reported, before Ange Postecoglou's had that opportunity to spend some time with them, share his vision with them, and see if he rates them?
I think you're looking at two different scenarios here. One with Hendry is that he's had a very good season in Belgium, and there's been a lot of interest in him. Now, from what we understand, Ostend were only going to buy him to flip him. They were going to buy him cheap and sell him on. Now, if that option's still there and there's still a lot of interest in Jack Hendry come the end of this tournament, then Celtic would be remiss to not try and cash in on that if they don't think he's part of the plans. Now, you're probably going to need him in for a game or two until you get your own signings in. I don't think he'll ever be good enough to play for Celtic, to be honest. I mean, if you watch that horror show against Partick Thistle a couple of years ago, that shows to me what Jack Hendry did in a Celtic jersey. Maybe he doesn't suit Scottish football, maybe he suited the style of Belgian football, and if there's a chance to cash in on him and use that as part of the rebuild, I think it's something that he has to do. When you look at Sved, I don't think he's interested in playing for Celtic, and this goes back to, I say this time last year, but just a bit later than this time last year, when Neil Lennon came out in that press conference after Ferencváros and says, there's players here that don't want to be here. Now, everybody at the time has said, well, you should have moved these players on. Now, you don't want to get into another scenario where you're bringing Sved in and there's maybe 2 or 3 others that don't want to be at the club. You can't make the same mistake twice. If he doesn't want to be here and there's an option for him to go, whether it's cashing in on him or sending him back out on loan, then do it, because he's not going to give his all if he doesn't want to be there.
The other one's in Cham, isn't it? The other one's in Cham, I think. Yeah. In that same boat, JP. And he would have been one of the guys, I guess, who was angling for a move last year as well, JP. So are you on Colin's kind of boat when it comes to that? Would you rather just ship these guys out? What I don't know where the nautical references are coming from today, but
I think it's as Colin said, it's about whether or not the players want to be at the club. If they've got a passion and a hunger to play for Celtic, and if they meet Ange Postecoglou and like what they hear and see from him, then I don't think you can have enough of people like that. But absolutely, if it's not for them, if Scotland and Glasgow's not for them, as it clearly isn't for anymore for Olivier and Cham, because it's quite clear he's wanted away for some time. He's definitely one of those players that Neil Lennon was talking about, and the transfer market was such last summer that it wasn't. Again, as Neil Lennon has said, I'm not in any way agreeing with the majority of what Neil Lennon said, because it was absolute mania at times. But the things that he said about the players wanting away, true. And they couldn't get away because the transfer market was puggled because of COVID. Nobody was buying anybody. So all these guys that wanted their moves couldn't get their moves, and then we were lumped with them in our biggest season. In our biggest season, and I don't know whose finger you can point the blame at for that, because there's nobody to point the blame at. If clubs aren't coming to buy these guys, where are they going to go? It was a horrible situation inflicted upon us at the worst time. And I know everybody was affected by COVID, but not everybody had numerous players that wanted to leave the club at the same time.
Another player who might be leaving, we believe, is Chris Ayer. And Stephen Welsh was asked that question yesterday as well. This is what he had to say.
I think everyone would be trying to establish themselves in the team anyway. especially with a new manager coming in. It's kind of a fresh start for everyone, so I'll be looking to impress as usual, as I do every pre-season since I came up with the first team. So I'm very much looking forward to it, and hopefully I can put a good first impression on it.
He's brilliant at no answering the question. The other part of that question was, are you going to be established as a first team pick? I know Colin has a view on that. I think that Stephen Welsh was one of the very few bright sparks of last season. I think his introduction went under the radar when you compare it to the kind of feedback we were getting around Sorrow and Turnbull when they came in. Welsh just quietly got on with his job, which a lot of that, I guess, is to do with the position that he plays. You don't always get a huge amount of credit for, playing centre half and winning balls, etc., which I think he does very, very well. You don't think, Colin, that he's a first pick next season, do you?
It all comes down to recruitment. But if you're looking to recruit better than what Stephen Welsh is, for me, I think he would be a squad player next year. But then it all comes down, as I said, to if you can get these players in. I wouldn't want him to be the first pick, because I think that means then that the level that you're looking at the defence wouldn't be good enough. I mean, Stephen Welsh came in and played, as you said, 21 games last season. But for a long period of time, he wasn't getting picked over guys like Shane Duffy, who wasn't exactly setting the header alight when he was in there. It was only towards the sort of second half of the season when he was given the responsibility and thrown in there. Now, you kind of think things might be different next year with fans back in the ground, but if you're wanting to build a team that's going to progress further, you've got to have better than Stephen Welsh in at centre half. That's not saying that he's not a good player, and I think he will develop. But I wouldn't want him to be in there as a first pick, because I don't think that means we will have strengthened.
Well, it's a good point, Colin. I think that domestically he is of that level, but we've not seen enough of him in a settled defence at any higher level than that. And I think that last season was an introduction. This season for me would be hopefully to see him playing more games than he did last time round. And I think he's already established himself. And certainly it is down to the recruitment. JP, what's your thoughts? And this will lead on to some of the chat around recruiting centre-halves, and in particular Eric Sviatchenko. We've already spoken about his current and ex-club Midtjylland. And there's chat about bringing him back in, so we'll lead into that as well. But what's your thoughts, firstly, on what Stephen Welsh has done and where it puts him in the pecking order?
I certainly didn't let himself down, and the weird way that he was kind of brought into the team and then jettisoned, after the Rangers game, wasn't it? It was a kind of weird way to sort of manage him, and bearing in mind what he did before last season, he was not on loan at Greenock Morton. He's not exactly been going and playing at like a even similar level to the league that we play in. So it's not as if he's going to be tested elsewhere. So it really was a bit of a baptism of fire for him to go in, and no fans as well, which possibly helped him in a way to get by in a way that maybe that didn't help Jack Hendry, because people got on Jack Hendry's back straight away, for any mistakes that were made.
For the Partick Pirouet, I think I like to call it.
Well, I've mentioned it before, but it was a run of 3 games, and it was like Red Bull Salzburg, Hearts away, Kilmarnock away, and we got beaten all of them. And for a Celtic fan, to associate a guy with 3 defeats consecutively, that's his 3 in a row, and maybe unfairly made a scapegoat for those games. One of the games we got a guy red carded. I think James Forrest got red carded. Declan and I were talking about it. Get well soon, Declan, by the way. And we were talking about it in off air, and so he's associated with that run of games, and I just think Welsh benefited from not maybe having the fan. It obviously works both ways. You want fans to give you that energy, and to get, if Welsh makes a last-ditch tackle, the crowd will be going mental and be right, and that could spur him on and kick him on for the rest of the game, maybe even for multiple games beyond that. But at the same time, he didn't have the pressure of the fans and the worry if he makes a mistake or whatever, if people are going to be on his back. I certainly think I'm more inclined to think we need to go out and buy someone absolutely cast iron, nailed on. That's his shirt. Number 5, that's his shirt. No one else takes it. We don't want to have this like worrying about putting a centre midfield guy in the defence, Beaton or whoever. It's got to be, we have a defender who is a defender, and that's it. You know.
Colin.
I was going to say, Paul, when we've had a podcast a couple of months back when we looked at the sort of amount of players that we reckon would be needed as part of this rebuild, and everyone sort of accepted that it's not going to be done in the one transfer window. Not now, especially when, as JP kind of puts behind us, that ominous 33 days that we've got until the first game of the season. But if you had to focus on only 3 positions that needed like the solid strengthening, like going out and spending some serious money in this transfer window, the 3 that I would be looking at is centre half, left mid, and a striker. And in the centre half position, we spoke about around this time last year that we needed at least 2 centre halves. That was when you had Ayer and Julian playing in there as your centre half pairing. Now it looks as if Ayer's going to be away, Julian's out injured, we don't know when he's going to be back. So you're looking at actually adding to that again. So how many do you actually need? You probably need 3 centre halves this window if you're going to get to a full complement.
What's Lustig doing? Tongue in cheek. No, I get your point, but I would probably say that although the left-hand side's not being dealt with properly, I think a goalkeeper is a must. I think a goalkeeper, a centre-half and a striker are the 3 main areas. JP, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, as a spine to build on, yeah. I mean, a goalkeeper, you need somebody that you can hang your hat on, you know, and I don't know if that will be Barkas. It was interesting, somebody said that Barkas is actually a Dutch speaker. Did you hear that? Was it on our podcast or some another podcast maybe? I don't know, or maybe I read it, but apparently he's a Dutch speaker and spent a lot of time in the Netherlands. Maybe that's nonsense. I might be regurgitating nonsense. I don't know, but who knows what's going to happen with Barkas? You'd like to think that he'll be around and will be given an opportunity, but it all goes back to whether or not he wants it. If he doesn't want to be here and he wants to go back to Greece or seek another challenge elsewhere, and he's not happy in Glasgow, then we cut our losses. But yeah, a striker as well is paramount, you know, because Edouard's going to be gone. That's surely imminent. And then, you know, we need somebody to replace his goals, because there's nobody else about that can do it.
No, and you know the thing you're talking there about wanting to be there. There is one of Stephen Welsh's answers later on in the interview around the fact that Ange Postecoglou obviously is not there yet, but he hasn't yet communicated with the players, and that is a massive concern, because like you were saying earlier, there are certain players, Colin, like Sved. We don't know the situation, but the manager might be the key to that decision, the key to the attitude of an individual player. So he's going to have to sell his vision going forward, and whether Barkas or Sved or anyone else buys into it. You know, I've heard the Bobby Petta name being mentioned time and time again, how Martin O'Neill breathed new life into Bobby Petta. I think that we got better performances and a better player out of Petrov when Martin O'Neill came in than had previously been seen, although Kevin Graham will point out a couple of good performances Petrov had the previous season. I just think that there are players at the club who will shine under the new gaffer. There will be a post-Lennon bounce, certainly, with quite a few of the players. But that remains to be seen, because the gaffer's not met or communicated yet with the team. But it does lead us on to that old question, and I used Mika Lustig in jest, because obviously Eric Sviatchenko has been linked with the club. And I've got to ask the question, is this a lack of creativity with our recruitment strategy going forward, or is this the type of player we actually need right now in terms of a ready-made captain, someone who knows the club and playing in a position that is the weakest in the team? I'll come to you first, Colin. What side of the fence are you on with this one?
I think it's quite lazy that we're looking at someone, and to be honest, I'm not sure how valid the link is. I reckon it's something that's just been thrown out there because Midtjylland was someone that we could actually be facing. I'd love to know if Postecoglou has even heard of Eric Sviatchenko before. I think it might be one of those ones, but if it is genuinely serious, I think it is very lazy. He's someone who was kind of ushered out the door at Celtic because he wasn't a first choice pick. And if we're going back to someone that wasn't your first choice pick now being your first choice pick, he's either got to have improved dramatically or our standards have slipped. And you're kind of looking at it and you're going, the kind of games I've seen him play since he left Celtic, he hasn't really been impressive. He played Rangers in the Europa League qualifiers a couple of years ago, and he wasn't that great. So are you really getting to the stage then that it's just a case of, if he's going to be our first choice centre half, our standards have slipped? And that's the way I look at it. I don't think to be honest, there's much in this, and if there was more to the actual link, we'd have probably seen more and more about it. But it seems to be a sort of throwaway article.
I liked him as a personality, JP. I thought that he lacked pace massively. His biggest issue for me was the pace that he lacked, and I think that when you are looking for a wee bit of the old, it's just a safety net, isn't it? Someone who knows the club, a safe bet. I don't think that's the route Celtic need to be going down.
I have to say, Brian did lead me down a bit of a path with his argument over the whole, we need somebody in that knows the club and that knows Glasgow and all that sort of thing, and
knows the city. Knows the city. Yeah,
but
he's a good taxi driver.
Yeah, but as a centre half's obviously a position that we're crying out for somebody. But it just feels like with Sviatchenko, it'd be like we're fishing in a paddling pool rather than actually, going to surely the ocean, which has numerous centre halves in it that we could go and get for a few million quid, who are maybe 22, 23, 24, and I know that players of that level come with a premium and all the rest of it, but I'd like to think that we could cast our net out further afield than a former player at 29 who left the club, and you leave a club for a reason, and he left, and going back for players very rarely works out, does it? There's not a lot of success stories where it works out. I mean, Charlie Nicholas comes to mind. I know that was a dark time for the club, and he didn't come back when we were all singing, all dancing, rip roaring, free scoring, never boring. Far from it at that time. But it doesn't sit well with me, and it doesn't feel right. It would be very underwhelming. And when talk of captaincy started getting flung about yesterday, I was like, whoa. Let's stop this bus before it crashes. So
do you remember when we signed Izagiri a couple of years ago?
Yeah,
and how that one came out of complete left field.
Well, it was Paul the Tim that set that one up, was it not?
It
looked like it at the time, but honestly, that's the way I feel about Sviatchenko coming back. Is the same way I felt about Izagiri. It was just lazy scouting.
Yeah,
if someone who knew he liked Celtic, bring him back in. He'll get the fans on board. No thanks.
And obviously the comparison going from the paddling pool to the ocean, carrying on the nautical theme, JP, thank you for that.
That was accidental.
Brilliant. I spoke to Eric Sviatchenko the day that he was paraded at Celtic Park, and this is what he had to say. Walking onto that pitch today was an amazing feeling. I cannot wait to do it in front of those fans for real. The physio said to me, have you ever felt loved? Then he explained that if I give my all for Celtic, I will feel it like never before. I like the words, but that was then. This is now. So I'm in the same boat as you, JP, when we're talking about that. Now we were also. Stephen Welsh was asked if indeed. Oh, there we go. There's mine. There's my one there.
What's that?
Spiritualised.
Oh, nice.
Amity Island, nice wee Jaws reference there, JP. But Stephen Welsh was asked if the Champions League qualifiers was the beginning of the recovery after last season's disappointment, and this is what young Stephen had to say.
I think the Champions League campaign is massive for the club every season. I think financially for the club it's a big thing, and then for the players to go and compete at the highest level. So we're always looking to do well at the European stage, because that's what every player, that's the level that every player that wants to play at.
So I'm looking at this season and I'm wondering to myself, and I've heard the discussion yesterday, a very good discussion on ACSOM around what is this season? Is this a season of transition? Because we're at that point, JP, 33 days before the first fixture. The gaffer's not in the door yet. The backroom team hasn't yet been confirmed. The head of recruitment, the director of football, it goes on and on and on. Is this a season of taking stock? And should Celtic, as a support, should the fan base be expecting the immediate return of the League Championship trophy? Because that is what normally we would expect. That's the standards that were set over a period in 9 years before last season. What's your thoughts on that, JP? How well received do you think Celtic fans, if it's communicated in a certain way, would accept that this is something that, because of where we are, we're going to have to build quite a lot of bridges this season? I don't think we can ever say we're going to accept anything other than the best. We can't accept second best because, as Shankly said, second best is nothing. And I totally agree with that, particularly in Glasgow. What's your thoughts going into the next season and the expectations of the fans?
Ooh, big question. Do you know what? I think it's such a big job, and it's almost like the success that we've enjoyed has come at a cost. It's like, it's almost like we've ran out of yards, and we need to sort of go right back to the start a bit. I'm not saying that we're way back to nothing, but it just feels like there's so much work needs done, and there's so much change happening that it would be somewhat miraculous if we were to be way ahead. Like we go to Ibrox the first game of the season, or the first time we play Rangers, and beat them, and then establish a lead. I would be looking to come out of Ibrox with a draw, and a respectable performance more than anything, just because of the state we're in. And I know people will be like, no, we should be going there and beating them and blah blah blah. Like we're not tooled up right now to beat them. Like we're not. They've got a settled side. They won the league at a canter. As much as you don't want to talk about that, but it's fact. It happened. Just like we have won the last 4 trebles, that happened. Whether they want to insert anomalies or clauses, or you only did it because of this. No, it happened. We won 4 trebles in a row. Deal with it. You won the league last season. You stopped us winning 10 in a row. Fine. But the fact is that now we have. We've got to look at the situation. Yes, the previous manager has left. Yes, the previous chief executive has left. But that doesn't mean to say that just suddenly you switch on a light and everything is great again. There's so much work to do, and the players not wanting to be there is such a huge concern, because they're key players. They're not peripheral players. They're key players, and key players need to be replaced. So I'm of the thinking, and it might be looked down upon by some people, but I'm of the thinking that I just want to get back into the ground, and I just want to see Celtic play, not on a screen, not on a phone. I just want to see them play in the flesh, and start to see what is instilled by the new manager, and whatever new players come in, because we've said before, we can't make mistakes in the transfer window now. There can't be flops. There can't be bedding in periods. Well, there can. There can be bedding in periods. That's allowed, but there can't be write-offs of 2, 3, 4 million players. Like, oh well, he's away, but out on loan to somebody or whatever. Guys that come in now have to do the job for Celtic in the first team. It can't be projects. It can't be guys that we signed specifically to then send out on loan. We need guys that can play in the first team. That's it.
It's an interesting point, JP, because I think that the first player to come in is Liam Shaw. And I would expect him to be viewed ordinarily as one of these players that you're referring to. I know that they get called a project player. I wouldn't have expected Liam Shaw to come in as a first team pick. That wouldn't have been my expectation of that player. What is he, 19, coming in from Sheffield Wednesday, Colin? I wouldn't have thought he was going to be in and around the first team, but because of the scenario that we're in, I agree with JP. Every player we pick, everyone that we recruit and bring in, has to be first team ready.
Yeah, definitely. And we're kind of getting into this period where we're going down to Wales in a couple of weeks' time to start the pre-season with the games that we've got coming up. a lot of these guys that last season we said they just weren't up to it, they've now got a fresh start. Guys like a Yeti that we say is, oh, that was a complete flop. These are guys that have got to now go and prove themselves and prove that they weren't wasted money. And they've got a new manager coming in. There's a new philosophy on how to play football. You've got to think that everyone should be looking at this Welsh training camp as a chance for them to nail down a jersey for next season, because I don't think there is. In fact, I'd say there's maybe one or two places that you think, right, okay, this person's going to play here. Like, for example, I think James Forrest will be a right midfielder next season, no matter what position you play. And I think David Turnbull's almost guaranteed a jersey for next season. But after that, almost everything else is up for grabs. So these players, like these project players like Liam Shaw or Luca Connell, or even Leo Connor coming back into the side, they have to look at this training camp as a chance for them to go and prove that they are good enough to play for Celtic.
Yeah.
And then if you get that out of them, then suddenly you don't need to replace that position. You might need to strengthen it in depth, but you've got someone that's in there and someone that's played in that position before, and that really helps us out this season.
See, in theory, though, I love what you say there, Colin, about a new philosophy from a manager, and because I'm sure he will bring an absolutely different approach than Neil Lennon did, JP. But when you look at the period of time he has with the new players, and we spoke about this all season, a culture isn't created overnight. You know, this takes you're talking about bedding in players. Bedding in a culture takes time. It's not a light switch, you know, and people slowly but surely, without them even realising, become part of that culture, because it's about behaviours, isn't it? It's about buying into it, and then the change of behaviours that then results in that culture being part of the institution that you are involved in, which is Celtic Football Club. My biggest concern also going into the new season is the fragmented nature of this holy trinity. And I remember, and I think this is the first time he's been mentioned, although Colin might have mentioned him before, Brendan Rodgers saying the Holy Trinity, and when all of those are working in tandem, then Celtic is an unstoppable machine. And I believe that. But it's not working like that at the moment, because what you've got is you've got the boardroom, and you've got a fan base who seem very far removed from the boardroom at this moment in time. And then you've got a team that, whether or not you believe we can influence them as fans and as an energy within the stadium, I believe we can actually, JP. I think that's part of the beauty of Celtic Park on the big nights, that we're able to overcome massive sides who might even be better than us, but they're not on the night because we're part of that. And I think the fragmented nature of that probably feeds into your thoughts earlier, JP, when you're saying you just want to get back into the ground. Can you see it coming together? Do you think that's going to take a long time to heal? You know, we've heard again more rhetoric from Neil Lennon attacking Celtic fans. That's what he's doing. And I'm not buying it that he's going to say that section or that breed, this new breed. No, if you're going to attack the Celtic support, you're attacking us all. And it's as simple as that, JP. Do you think it's too fragmented? How long do you think that's going to take to repair?
I think it probably comes from the manager and how he sort of sets his stall out. I think that will have a big part to play. And it's maybe not a surprise that they've gone for somebody who appears to be quite bullish and, you know, quite defiant. Somebody who can maybe bring a team together, bring a squad together. They certainly, from the bits and bobs I've seen of him, you know, he's not short of animation, put it that way. So that'll have a big part to play, as will getting back into the ground. I mean, I renewed my season ticket yesterday, £666. Not all will leave my account at the same time, right? That's how much it is. It's just mental. But £666, and I've never been less excited, because I just basically flung money away. I don't know when I'm going to get into the ground. I know I've signed up to this ballot thing, which you obviously could do once you've renewed, and I did that. But that's a Hail Mary, isn't it? You don't know if you're going to, how many people are going to be allowed in. You know, you just don't know. So that, from that point of view, is why I'm not overly excited about the season, because being a season ticket holder, it's about going to the games. It's not about sitting in your living room watching it on a TV. And I know that that's out of the club's hands right now, but ultimately, it's now 2 years in a row that this is happening. For the whole of last season, we didn't go to a game. which blows my mind that is actual fact, but it is. And you know, like you said about fans influencing the players, that's key to this rebuild. Is having that connection back to, you know, if there's going to be so many new players coming in. You know, there's players played for Celtic last season and never experienced fans. That is mental. That is absolutely mental. That, you know, say what you like about Shane Duffy, he never played in front of Celtic fans, never got to experience that. Whether he was good, bad or indifferent, he never got to do that. And some people will say, well, he didn't deserve to do it, but that's not fair because you don't know what was going on in his personal life. I still maintain that is something that you should be looking at. So
Ayeti and Barkas still haven't played in front of fans.
Exactly. So I think there's a lot to be said for that. And if you go back to talking about fans influencing the players, take the fans out of the ground. Celtic against Man United. Do we beat Man United in that Champions League game when Nakamura scores? You know, I don't know if we do. You know, the din when was it Saha that took the penalty? Boric saved it. The din when he took that penalty. If he takes that in an empty ground, he probably puts it in the top bin. Does he score it? You know, and obviously he didn't score it. So I don't know. There's a lot of arguments to be made about that.
And you're talking about a Hail Mary. Surely it's a Hail Mary that that we're going to be using, JP. Now, it takes us on to the coming together, the reparation, if you like, of that relationship between us, the fans, and the club. And by club, I mean, obviously, those in charge. And I think that over the last few weeks, I'll come to you first, Colin, there's been criticism already that I've heard around Dominic Mackay, and obviously his face appeared on one of the banners outside Celtic Park. And I've said I find that quite unfair because I don't think that he has been at the club long enough to make his influence known. I think there has been a lot happening in the background that a lot of people maybe are unaware of. I know that he's building a lot of bridges with various groups and fan media outlets as well, and his communication has been vastly better than the club had been previously. So at this moment in time, I think it's a bit early to be tarring Dom Mackay with the same brush. I mean, if you were unhappy with the outgoing CEO and you make your feelings known, that's fine, but I think it's a bit early to be tarring Dom Mackay with that brush. What's your thoughts, Colin?
There was part of the interview when Ange Postecoglou was announced, and you got the sort of bonus interview with Dominic Mackay at the end of that. And there was something that was really quite interesting as part of that, and it was about the modernisation of the club from top to bottom and bringing things up to the standards that it should be at. Now, Celtic actually approved that to go out. I mean, if he'd have said that and it didn't go out, we would never have heard it. But the fact is, the club clearly think this is something that we have to do, and it's been given the go-ahead to do it. Now, you're saying that he's out there building bridges with fan groups and with fan media and with everything else. That's part of a modernisation of Celtic Football Club, is that you're actually coming away from the old school of the leaks that go out to the mainstream media. I mean, how many times did social media know the Celtic team before it was actually officially posted? Or how many times did you know that, well, actually we're looking at this player and he's coming in before anything was ever discussed? It was because of the sort of way that information was passed out of the club. Now it looks as if that fans are actually being looked at as an important factor as part of the club, and that should have been the way it's been for a long time. So it's a great thing that he's doing that. Obviously, he's starting from a low base. The kind of relationship has probably been as fragmented, as probably as bad as what it was right back to when the board was overhauled back in '94. That I wouldn't say it's as bad as that, but it's as bad as it's been since then. And you can see that. You see a lot of people in the comments saying, I'm not going to renew my season ticket. I see it on social media. I'm not renewing until this, that, and the next thing. The clubs now came out and said, if you don't renew by the deadline, it won't be extended. So they're giving in one hand and taking away in the other. It's almost as if they're trying to force the hand of some of the fans. And I think they might end up regretting that. So although they're making good steps. There's still a long way for them to go, and as you said, it's still early days for Mackay, so you've got to give him the benefit of the doubt now. But Celtic fans will be quick. If they keep saying that things are going the way that they previously were under Peter Lawwell, they won't be slow to come out and have a go at him.
The big thing for me, JP, is there needs to be an element of patience here, because there is so much to be done at Celtic, and so much we're even unaware of that needs to be done behind the scenes at Celtic. And I think in terms of the starting point, you know, Colin called it a bonus feature on the Ange Postecoglou DVD there. It was obviously refreshing for Dominic Mackay to address the Celtic fans. What was your thoughts on the content of that? Because I thought it was very positive.
Well, I mean, he has to be positive, doesn't he? He's not going to sit there licking our collective wins over last season. He's got to be looking forward. And I think, in a sense, you know, some people would be like, "Well, what a job he's got in his hands," you know, trying to you know, piece us back together. You know, we've fallen down at the bottom of the hill, so to speak. But in actual fact, all he has to do is just look at the discontent and right those wrongs. That's you know. Don't make the same mistakes as the previous incumbent, you know, and don't blur the lines between being a CEO and being a head of recruitment. If you know, we all speculate that is what's happened, right? We don't know for a fact, or do we, that Peter Lawwell muddied the water in terms of that. We just speculate that is the case. It can only be that is the case without knowing for sure, because it just, who else has been doing it? Who else is doing it just now? Who's been doing it since Nicky Hammond left? And we've all heard stories of players being suggested or being told that they're coming to the managers. I mentioned it before about the Rami Gershon, that signing, and there'll be many others. Brendan Rodgers. I've got about 1 million wingers. You know, that comment, you know, and he'll be a good player for the club, wasn't his signing. So who was it? Why were these guys getting signed? Was it favours for agents? What was it? So all of that stuff has to be binned, and
100%.
And you know, the people in charge of that department do that job. Yeah. You know, just like the marketing people do the marketing job, the recruitment people do the recruitment job, and that's it going forward. And that's his starter for 10. And if he does that, then if everybody knows that everybody's pulling in the same direction at Celtic, then he's on to a winner.
You know, sorry, Colin, on you go.
I was going to say, so just on that, JP, we're asking Dominic Mackay to delete Dudu Dahan's number on his phone as part of the handover.
Yeah, no, absolute ghost Dudu Dahan every single time he phones.
You know, when we're talking through some of the issues, there are legacy issues. That's what we would call them, that he needs to deal with. He didn't create them, and that's probably one of the biggest ones. Marvin Comper's name always springs to mind. The Marian Shved comments. There's players coming in, even under Neil. Yeah, there's players coming in under Lennon, who, you know, weren't his first choice, were they even his choice? And, you know, these are the things that will happen gradually behind the scenes. The other thing, though, speaking of Lennon, is we've not had the opportunity, certainly this group of people have not had the opportunity to speak about, and I'm not labouring the comments of Neil Lennon, but I just feel as though he's a man who is really needing to look at his own responsibility in last season, rather than trying to blame everyone from COVID, as if that's a person, to the government, to the Celtic support. And the one that really rankles me is the Celtic support, and then trying to insinuate that there are certain breeds of fans that he has nothing in common with. So what was your thoughts again, Colin, on him coming out and attacking the Celtic support as if we've chased Peter Lawwell out of the club and we were to blame for the disharmony at Celtic Football Club, even though we weren't there last season?
I think it's honestly about time that Lennon just stops this. Just enough's enough. I mean, what is he gaining out of doing all of this? And there should be anyone that wants to try and give him newspaper columns and stuff like that to air his views. He had his time to do it when he was manager of Celtic. He didn't do it. Now, to come out and try and blame the fans and blame everybody else, what's the point? It's not going to get him any favours. The next time the Celtic job comes up, he'll never ever be linked with it. He'll be lucky if he gets another job again. It's about time that he actually started to maybe concentrate on himself, put what's happened behind him and try and move on. But the longer he keeps dragging it out, the less relevant he becomes.
Now, what's your thoughts, JP? Because he's done the classic Boycey. He's doubled down on this, isn't he? And he's come back for more. And you think to yourself, you've already done your article with the Times. Every opportunity you get, you're going to be banging on about this because a massive part of last season was down to him.
Yeah, I mean, I would like Neil Lennon to go on and get a job in coaching as a manager or coach, whatever, somewhere else. It's certainly not going to be in Scotland. I think he admitted that himself the other day on that show that he was on. Because I don't wish ill upon the guy. I don't want him to not be successful. He clearly can do a job. He's done a job at Celtic and did it successfully. This whole marginalising into like 3 or 4 months didn't go well out of my 19-20 year association. I think that's a bit of a strange way to look at it. But I do take umbrage with quite a lot of the things that he said. I also agree with some of the things that he said. With regards to you can't get away from the player disharmony. That's either partly on him or just partly to do with the fact that they were oversaturated with success, which I did say a number of months ago was my thoughts on it. But this idea that the Celtic fans were used to success and suddenly we weren't getting it and we were throwing our toys out the pram. I think somebody very, very succinctly put it on Twitter yesterday, and basically listed out all the things that happened and went, I'm sorry, right, but there's not having success, and then there's this, and it just listed out all the things that have gone wrong either side of the Ross County game. Yes, we found a bit of form in December and looked like we were maybe getting back on the horse a little bit, but it was an absolute disaster. Europe was an absolute disaster, unforgivable, and I just, there was so much went wrong. It wasn't just Ross County. That was the culmination of everything. And the meek surrender in the Ross County game of that record was horrific. I mean, people rightly pointed out when we got beat 4-0 at Tynecastle, 4-0 at Tynecastle of a team that got relegated. Do you know what I mean? They and Kyle Lafferty scoring as well was horrible. Simunovic had a nightmare that day. The team were applauded at that game by the players, by the fans that were lucky enough to have tickets. It's hard as anything to get a ticket for Tynecastle these days because of the reduction and allocation and whatnot. But I watched that in McCool's, and I remember there was a round of applause in McCool's as well. People were gutted, but there was a kind of like, well, you know what, it's happened. But there was the bigger picture at that time, and there was a bigger picture. It was more a case of like, well, we're not an absolute shambles of a club, which it felt like we were at that time in the Ross County game. So I'm not having that. I'm not having the we're chucking our toys at the pram. Plus, it was a couple of hundred people that decided to go to the ground. It wasn't thousands of people. Yes, people voiced their displeasure online. Of course, they're going to voice their displeasure online. If it was a full house at Celtic Park, they would have known all about it. So an echo chamber online is nothing compared to what they would have had there been fans in the ground that night.
Agreed. Today has been excellent to be back. It's a first appearance this week for yours truly. So thank you, JP Mason and Colin Watt, for joining me. Thanks everybody for getting involved on Twitter, Facebook and YouTube. I've not had the same opportunities to bring you into the conversation due to the fact that we've got some of the videos from the press conference, and hopefully that will be a regular thing going forward, and I'll be able to do both at the same time, because obviously, as well as talking to these great gentlemen on the show, I need to try and juggle the videos and the comments as well. Yes, we'll be back same time next week, and at that point we will know the result of England v Scotland. Colin and I will be talking about that on Friday on Colin's show, so please join us then, and please subscribe on YouTube if you haven't done so already. Thanks everybody for getting involved in a Celtic state of mind.